Hello everyone, welcome back to another video on the channel. Today I'm going to be podficking the prologue of a Naruto fic called The Fox's Aiboh. Aiboh, in case you're wondering, is the Japanese term for partner. So, here we go. The second the battle ended, Kurama called out Sasuke's name, only waiting for the Ravenette to run over to them before the fox retreated into the mind space, his fear for his partner no longer having to be held back for the sake of the battle. Naruto had been overextending himself far too much for far too long, even having to let Kurama take over at the end due to overexhaustion, and he feared the possible permanent repercussions. But the sight he found made his heart turn to ice in his chest as he pulled the blonde into his arms. "You absolute idiot," he said, internally begging Naruto to open his eyes. "Why did you use your own chakra for that attack? You could have just asked me for more." His prayers were answered when the blonde slowly dragged his eyes open, hazy but mostly present despite the obvious complete lack of energy. "Protect Sasuke. Knew you could handle it. Not sure how much you would need to finish it," Naruto whispered, only audible thanks to Kurama's fox hearing. "Others, Sasuke, safe?" Kurama nodded rapidly, unsurprisingly seeing Naruto offer what had to be the tiniest smile in existence, but he could see it nonetheless. "It's over. We won. Everyone that was still alive is safe now. Sasuke's exhausted and banged up, but he'll live. He's with your body now. I called him over since I had to come back here to check on you," the fox reassured, seeing in the blonde's eyes the way he was immediately more at ease. "Good. That's good." Naruto trailed off, clearly fighting to keep his eyelids open despite them trying to slip shut. "Thank you, Kurama." The fear spiked as he suddenly realized that Naruto's level of chakra was barely above nothing. If that ran out, he didn't even want to think about it. He tried to share some of his own chakra, remembering how the blonde had come up with the idea of giving some to Kakashi earlier in the fight, but his own overexhaustion prevented anything but a small trickle from transferring to his partner. It was, however, enough to give Naruto a small burst of energy, and he reached up to place a hand on Kurama's face. "Take care of the others for me, please, and don't be sad. I don't like it when you're sad." The fox barely noticed the tears forming in his eyes as he nodded. "I promise you don't have to worry about them." Naruto smiled again, his eyes holding sadness through the haze of fog and now the tears running down his face. "Yourself too, Kurama. Try." Kurama nodded again, unable to say anything more. "Take care, Aiboh. Thanks for everything. Love you, Kurama." And those were the last words he spoke before his eyes finally slipped shut and he lay still, his hand falling from where it had rested in Kurama's face as the fox sensed Naruto's chakra finally dropping completely to zero. "Naruto!" he roared, finally finding his voice, but the boy in his arms didn't stir, didn't twitch, didn't give any signs of life at all. And he knew that it was because, for all intents and purposes, he was dead. Anyone with no chakra, who had completely spent it all to the degree that Naruto had, would be completely and permanently brain dead. Or perhaps soul dead would be the better term. Kurama didn't know. Chakra replenished over time and could be given or shared, but complete depletion meant death in the most real way imaginable. Not physically in this case, but mentally, spiritually, emotionally, everything that made a person, well, themselves. The only reason Naruto's body was still functioning at this point was because Kurama was still inhabiting it due to the seal already being broken and the circumstances surrounding Naruto's death. For that is what it was, the death of his partner. He knew he should return to the real world, should tell the others what had happened and fulfill Naruto's wish to take care of the others. But he couldn't bring himself to leave the mind space, to leave his partner's mental corpse, and the irrational fear that it would disappear if he took his eyes off it for even a few minutes. So he allowed himself to stay there, in his grief, holding the corpse of the person closest to his heart except for, perhaps, Hagoromo himself. He trusted Sasuke and the rest of the team to make sure Naruto's body wouldn't require his assistance in the meantime. Sasuke, startled as the Ninetales, Kurama, he reminded himself, used his name, called out for him. Wondering what the fox wanted, he jogged over to the others. only for his eyes to widen as he suddenly had to run to catch Naruto's body when it fell over. Kurama? He asked, garnering confused looks from the others, but no response from the fox. Ninetales has a name, he absently explained, focusing on the body in his arms, still gave no response. Sighing and realizing that Kurama was likely talking with Naruto, as he had seemed very worried about him, Sasuke stood up and maneuvered the blonde's body onto his back. Gather the others near the cave we passed while heading here, he commanded, turning to the rest of the group. Tell the medical ninja not to heal anyone yet if the injury isn't life-threatening. We don't need them using up their chakra before we assess the full scope of everyone's injuries and what needs to be healed first. Seeing the sensibility of his plan, the others nodded, everyone springing off to follow his directions except for the wounded Kakashi and Iruka, who were helping each other to stand up and clearly waiting for him to start walking, following him when he started and head in the direction of the cave. Once everyone had gathered to the meeting point, Sasuke assessed both himself and the still unconscious blonde for injuries. Finding none that needed to immediately be healed, he used his own first aid kit to wrap some of the deeper cuts and informed Sakura of his assessment. She just nodded and went back to healing the others, as Sasuke sat between the others and the entrance of the cave, standing guard just in case another enemy appeared and tried to take advantage of their weakness. He could not, however, bring himself to stray far from Naruto, and so he lay the blonde next to him, seating himself between the unconscious boy and the potential danger, and instinctively lacing their fingers together, though not tightly, just in case he needed to move quickly or use double-handed signs. No enemy appeared, and the group started their trek back to home the next day, the members of each village splitting off from the rest of the group and returning to their own homes. Quite a few of the injured members were either still unconscious or unable to walk on their own, so they were being carried. Sasuke, who was carrying Naruto again as it didn't feel right to him to let anyone else do so, noticed Kakashi and Iruka staying next to each other at the back of the group, seeming to be keeping a watchful eye on their surroundings as if guarding the others. Sakura, Tsunade, and the other medical ninjas were keeping a close eye on the more seriously wounded, clearly ready to provide assistance at any time, and they were joined by Hinata, who had shown some serious, if somewhat amateur, talent in medical ninjutsu, and would likely be receiving the proper training soon after her demonstration. The Ravenet worriedly glanced at the blonde on his back. Naruto hadn't woken yet, and even Kurama hadn't retaken control. It was concerning, Sasuke had to admit. He knew his friend was tired, Kurama had admitted that much when he had taken over at the end of the battle, but Naruto was usually awake pretty soon after a battle unless he had sustained much more serious injuries than he had in this fight, so for him to be asleep so long was worrying. Even Sasuke, as exhausted as he was, and having fought both Madara and Kaguya alongside the blonde, was awake and able to carry said blonde without too much difficulty. Why was it different for Naruto? He felt like something was deeply wrong, and that honestly scared him, because he didn't understand what was happening or how he could help Naruto wake up. He wanted his friends to open his eyes already, and probably ask for ramen, but at least that would be normal. He was woken from his thoughts by Sakura coming up to him. "Everything all right, Sasuke?" she asked. "You seem distracted." He considered whether or not to tell her his thoughts, but eventually decided to just say it. "It's concerning that Naruto has been unconscious for so long with the degree of injuries he received, even with his exhaustion," he plainly stated. "I feel like something's wrong, but I don't know what." Sakura nodded, frowning. "I can check him over once we stop for the night." "We don't need to stop the group since he doesn't appear to be in any immediate danger." Sasuke just nodded and the pink cat dropped back to continue keeping a watch over the rest of the wounded. "There doesn't appear to be anything keeping him from waking up," Sakura said, her brow furrowed in worried confusion as she packed away her medical tools. "Right now, there's nothing we can do for him. We just have to keep waiting and hope Naruto can fight off whatever's going on in there." Sasuke nodded, moving to sit next to the still unconscious blonde. "Wake up soon, Naruto," he murmured, brushing a piece of hair off the other boy's face before lacing their fingers together again. "We're all waiting for you to come back." Konoha Hospital, 1 month later. "Any news?" Sakura asked, stepping into the room and closing the door behind her, as Sasuke shook his head. "Naruto still hasn't woken up," he said grimly. The pink cat frowned sadly, then both their eyes widened as a sad laugh that came from the bed. Turning towards the blonde, they saw him slowly sitting up, with tears starting to pour out of his eyes that were still closed for some reason, as he shook his head. Naruto will not be waking up, he said quietly, the laughter ceasing even as their tears continued to fall, and both ninjas registered his voice. Kurama, what's going on? Sasuke asked urgently, both the teen's eyes widening even further as the fox's words. Kurama finally looked at them, deep pain visible in his red eyes that were so different and yet so similar to Naruto's blue ones. Naruto's gone. It's just me. The words were barely audible, but they seemed to be the most deafening thing in the world. Everything else silenced as Sasuke's world shattered upon hearing them. There was a ringing in his ears. Only the words, Naruto is gone, repeating in his head. He stared at Kurama's pained, still tear-filled eyes, barely registering Sakura next to him screaming at the fox. That couldn't be right, could it? Naruto always bounced back. But Kurama's eyes held too much pain for him to be lying. The Ravenette slowly stood up and moved to sit next to Kurama on the bed, offering its presence to the clearly distressed fox. His own world was shattering, but he had a feeling that the Biju was experiencing something similar. What happened? He asked quietly, the words cutting through Sakura's yelling. The room fell silent as Kurama looked down at his hands, guilt overtaking his expression. Complete chakra overdepletion. He used the last of it in the war. I should have noticed when he had to let me take over, but I didn't until it was too late, and my own chakra levels were too low to do anything meaningful. Sasuke considered the fox's words, the image of Naruto protecting him flashing through his mind, and the ringing in his ears died down slightly. It was his own choice, wasn't it? His own way, on his own terms, just like always. Knowing him, he'd want us to pick ourselves up and keep moving forward, to keep protecting everyone he had to leave behind. He won't be left in the past, but we need to use his memory to do what he would have done if he was still here. That includes you, Kurama, he added, placing a hand on Kurama's shoulder as the fox looked at him with pure grief and sorrow in his eyes. His world was still shattered, but maybe if he helped the one that Naruto had clearly claimed as a partner, the one who was now stranded in a world that had always hated him, maybe they could get through it together. Unknown location, 5 years later. Kurama stood in front of the ancient temple, looking at the small group who stood by his side. Sasuke stood to his right, Rinnegan scanning the area with his Sharingan, while Hinata did the same with her Byakugan. Sakura stood to his left, hand in hand with the purple-haired Jonin, and Kakashi and Iruka brought up the rear. Sasuke let out a breath, turning to the fox. It's safe, but it looks like it only has enough charge to send one person. Hinata confirmed this assessment, keeping her dojutsu activated just in case any threats tried to sneak up on them. You should go, Kakashi suggested, the rest of the group nodding in agreement as he continued. You have the most knowledge of the entire situation, and you'll have the greatest chance to change just enough to save him while not compromising our sense of self. Kurama's eyes widened in shock, looking between everyone. Are you sure? Shouldn't one of you go? He won't trust me as much as he would anyone else. He was interrupted by Sasuke placing a hand on his shoulder. You know him the best out of everyone here, Kurama. Go save your partner, not only for yourself, but for all of us too. The Ravenette turned the Biju towards the temple, Hinata unsealing the doors as the rest of the group gently pushed the fox towards the now accessible entrance. Kurama looked at everyone's faces, the doors slowly closing behind him. Sasuke, the human closest to Naruto, who had been his biggest support throughout the past 5 years. Sakura, the most emotional of the group, who had helped him understand that it was okay to feel sadness and grief. Hinata, the soft-spoken girl who had brought him food on the many occasions when he didn't feel like eating. Iruka, the man who anyone could tell Naruto was seen as a father, and the one who had told him stories about Naruto so many times that the fox could now recite them in his sleep. And Kakashi, who had sat and talked with him about their mutual feelings of guilt and how they needed to try and move on, but they should never forget the past and the ones who loved them. You can do it, Kurama! Go save Naruto! The words echoed in both his mind and the chamber as the door slammed shut, sealing Kurama in darkness. He took a deep breath, spinning to face the other direction as a bright orange light began to fill his vision. Wait for me, Aiboh, Kurama whispered, feeling a soul be pulled from Naruto's body and transported back in time. I won't let you be hurt again, I promise, Naruto. And as he opened his eyes to meet the double Rinnegan of the Sage of Six Paths, he made one more silent vow, to protect those who had shown him kindness and love, no matter what. And that was the prologue of the Fox's Aiboh, also known as the What If Kurama Went Back in Time fic. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on here. The chakra explanation for Naruto's death hopefully made sense to all of you. I did attempt to explain it. But yeah, we've got this little group helping out Kurama, and especially Sasuke. That will be developed later in this fic. But yeah, this is, by the way, a Sasunaru fic, in case you couldn't tell. So yeah, that's definitely going to come into play later in this fic. So yeah, hope you all enjoyed this, and I will see you next time, guys. Have a great day!